Tying up a fun little panfish fly today. This is called the Bluegill Belly Bean. Paul Beal created this over at Frankenfly. I ran across it a number of years ago and just thought it would be a fun little panfish fly. Being in warm water circles, I'm always on the lookout for interesting bass flies or panfish flies, and this one kind of caught my eye, and it's been a real good producer and a lot of fun to tie. Pretty straightforward in its construction. You can vary this up with different materials, even different hooks and things like this, and you can basically make this to match up anything that you need and have a lot of fun with it. So that's the Bluegill Belly Bean. I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to start the Bluegill Belly Bean with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad. This is a heritage hook. It's a 60-degree bend jig hook. This is the model number J60AP. There's other 60-degree hooks you could use, and if you don't have a 60-degree hook, by all means, just use it has a wider gap to it. Just use a nice 3x long, maybe even 4x long streamer hook if you want, or 2x long nymph hook. I'm going to debarb that hook. This is a size 4 hook, and the size is important primarily because of the dumbbell eyes that you're going to use. I'm using a medium dumbbell eye. Obviously, for panfish, I'd probably go down to a size 6 or even an 8. Don't want to get too small because then they inhale the flies too quick, as well as you get a lot of small fish that will strike it. So I tend to stick with the bigger ones, but that's what I'm going with today is a size 4. This, I'm going to attach my thread. I'm using a UTC Ultra Thread 140 Denier in a fluorescent Chartreuse. The whole bug's going to end up being pretty much Chartreuse, so that's why I'm going with this color. It's going to be just visible slightly in the end. I'm going to attach my thread just behind the 60-degree bend, wrapping down maybe about the length of the eye, and then stopping in the middle. That's where I'm going to attach the dumbbell eyes. For dumbbell eyes, I'm using what's called a double pupil. Not pupa, pupil. This is, I think it's a hairline dumbbell eyes. This is just a black with red and black centered pupa. You can use regular dumbbell eyes if you want, or even like a gold or silver dumbbell eyes, or even bead chain eyes if you want something that's not quite as heavy. This uses a nice heavy dumbbell eye so that it will sink down real well. We're going to get some nice cross wraps in there, securing that in. Then I'm going to wrap under the eyes and over the hook shank to draw those thread wraps in nice and tight. That's going to secure those eyes nice and tight to the hook shank. I have those so that the edge of the eyes here are just right at the 60-degree bend. I'm going to add a drop of head cement right along these thread wraps. Let that soak in there a little bit. That's just going to help secure it just a little bit more. Leaving my thread right behind the dumbbell eyes. The first material I'm going to tie in, other than the dumbbell eyes, is some crystal flash. Now I'm using a flash accent. You can use crystal flash or flash accent if you want. The original Belly Bean had just a couple strands of crystal flash in it. Again, if you're on a smaller hook, I would probably just use a couple thin strands, but for this, I'm actually going to use 3. I'm going to make it a little bit more pronounced. I'm going to tie that in around the midpoint, advancing my thread down the hook shank a little bit. I'll then fold over that crystal flash and bring that down along the top of the hook shank, wrapping this in all the way down to the end of the hook shank. I'm going to trim that. I want that to be about the length of the hook, which is in front of the eye to the bend. Then I'm going to bring my thread back up and open spiral wraps to just a little bit in front of, or I should say behind the eye of the hook. This is where you're going to tie in the legs. I'm using some Sili legs. Now, as I mentioned, you can do all kinds of color combinations with this and feel free to have fun with it. So because this is mostly a Chartreuse, I'm going to use some Chartreuse Sili legs, but these are a two-toned. Now, you could use a real, like a Chartreuse in the middle and black tipped if you want. I'm using just kind of a lighter green or lighter Chartreuse, should say darker Chartreuse tipped on these. I'm going to take two of them, cut those out. I'm going to bring those up right about the midpoint of those Sili legs, similar to the crystal flash. I'm going to tie this in, wrapping downward a little bit, and then I'm going to fold this over. I'm not really concerned about this being exactly perfect halfway down those Sili legs, so that when this is folded over, I have all of these even. I'm going to trim these a little bit longer than the crystal flash, but what I get is I get just a little bit of those darker tips in there. Now I'm going to tie in some of the body material. The first material is some Estaz. This is a standard Estaz in a pearl Chartreuse. I'm going to tie this in right at the back, and I'm going to secure that real well, and then I'm going to run my thread up to about 3/4 up the hook shank. I only need to leave maybe about the width of the dumbbell eyes right behind the dumbbell eyes to fill in just a moment. You can do this a little different if you want. If you look at other instructions, some of them will have this about 50-50. It's up to you. Part of it is also going to depend on the hook you use. Some 60-degree hooks have a shorter shank than others. I think the important thing is you've got this nice back end of Estaz in here that gives it some nice bulk, nice flash to it. The front portion is more, I think, to kind of finish it off and cover up around the dumbbell eyes. To secure that in. Trim away the excess. And I'm going to add a few thread wraps to secure that. Now I'm going to tie in another set of Sili legs. I'm going to take two more. You could do three if you want. On some of the smaller sizes, I see some people will tie in just one Sili leg here, and then they just get one sticking out. What I want to do here is I want to tie these in, and I want to have the tips about halfway down the tail. So on these, I'm not tying these in right at the halfway point of the Sili legs because I'm wanting to include more of those darker tips. Securing that in, I'll trim away the excess. Set that aside. Smooth this off just a little bit. And the one thing I did want to do, which I didn't do that well here, I'll backtrack and do this. I do want to get these more onto the sides. So I'll unwrap some of that and bring these over to my side a little bit. I don't want these on the bottom because remember, this is going to ride hook point up like this. So I want these more out to the side. Sili legs tend to float, so these will actually at rest, hopefully barring any current in the stream or whatever, these will float up a little bit. With my thread about the midpoint there, I'm going to tie in my other set. These are the same thing. I want to keep these about the same length as the first ones. Securing those in with a few wraps, I'm going to Bring those down also to the other side. Then I can trim away this excess. And then clean this up just a little bit. It's up to you in terms of the dubbing that you're going to use to cover up these thread wraps and finish this off. I like to, because I'm doing such a nice bright chartreuse fly here, I like to go ahead and just use some ice dub. This is just in a fluorescent chartreuse color. And I'm going to just put a, not real super thin, but I'm going to make maybe a thin, what I would call thin, dubbing noodle, maybe about 4 or 5 inches long. And this is going to be initially just to wrap around behind the dumbbell eyes to fill this space in right here. I just kind of want to smooth that all off. Bring my thread right behind the dumbbell eyes. Now I'm going to make about a 4 or 5 inch sparse noodle. So when I say sparse, I mean about half of what I had in the previous one, which I think I had mentioned was a thin one. This is going to be to go over the to go over the thread wraps in a crisscross pattern to cover up all those thread wraps and fill in all this space right around the head here. So a couple wraps each direction like this, behind, something around the front like that. See, that just gives me it just cleans all that up real nice. I'm going to make a little bit more of a dubbing noodle, a couple inches here. And this is to just be tied up against the dumbbell eyes here, just to kind of finish that off. Bring my thread down right in front. And here I'm just going to put in a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. As you can see, hardly any of that thread is visible. Put our whip finish in and secure that. And this is a fly that will definitely get kind of not just chewed up, but because it bounces along the bottom, it's going to get chewed up from the bottom. So throw some head cement all around those thread wraps and there, and then even a little bit in the center right there just to hold that together a little bit. You could pick some of the ice dub out a little bit if you want, just to fluff that out. But like I said, when this is fished, it will definitely become fuzzier and fuzzier. So there is the bluegill belly bean. I have found that this actually, especially a little bit larger size, it works pretty well for smallmouth. In these smaller sizes, like I said, in your 6s and 8s, it's a fun little panfish fly. Find some other colors. Take a look out online. There's all kinds of ideas on this fly, and dream up some of your own. But tie up some bluegill belly beans, as it is a fun panfish fly if you happen to be in warm water circles. So there's the bluegill belly bean. Thanks for watching. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com, where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. And what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.